The number 2 wide receiver in the nation, Kevin Coleman, is someone who we've talked about here on this channel before, but today I wanted to break down the top 8 schools for Kevin Coleman and where they all sit. And those 8 schools, in no particular order, are USC, Oregon, Alabama, Arizona State, Georgia, Penn State, and Florida State. This is going to be a really interesting race. And with that being said, before we jump into this, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from y'all. So which school out of that top 8 do you think ultimately lands Kevin Coleman? He is going to be a super, super good get for somebody. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification because I do constant college football content, player reviews, film analysis, talk style videos like this. And I'm on my push to 5,000 subscribers in my first year, and I would love to have you along for the journey. But with all that being said and out the way, let's talk Kevin Coleman. And we'll start with the Alabama Crimson Tide because there was a point in time when they were considered to be the favorite in the race for Kevin Coleman. Now, make no mistake, I am certainly not saying that the Alabama Crimson Tide, their status in this race has diminished, but I do believe that Kevin Coleman is an individual who will take this to distance, and in fact, he's talked about how his commitment will probably come January 8th at the All-American game, and he will early enroll. But because of that, I think that it's safe to say that every team in this top 8 does have a chance, though I do believe some are ahead, and I think the Alabama Crimson Tide are one of the teams in this race who have to feel good about where they sit. Independent of Steve Sarkisian, because the loss of Sark to Texas is a blow for Alabama, Sark being the biggest factor for Texas, but we'll talk about that when we get to Texas. Independent of the Alabama Crimson Tide not having Steve Sarkisian, it's actually Freddie Roach that's been able to establish a phenomenal relationship with Kevin Coleman. And Kevin Coleman is a guy who's talked about wanting to be developed. And I'm going to be bluntly honest, there might not be anywhere better in the nation to develop wide receiver talent than Alabama. As we sit here right now and talk about this, there are 14 active pass catchers in the NFL that find routes to the Alabama Crimson Tide. 14. That is an incredible number. And because of that, the Alabama Crimson Tide have to feel good. When you look at the Crimson Tide, they've continued to recruit that position at a high level. The wide receiver coach stays, very important, and they were able to nab 5-star quarterback Ty Simpson, who will be in Coleman's ear. So the Crimson Tide in a beautiful position for Kevin Coleman. Very excited to see how this ends up because I think they're a team that every wide receiver is interested in because of their ability to develop. Florida State is a really, really interesting team right now, and not just when it pertains to Kevin Coleman. Florida State is recruiting at a very high level, and they have a ton of hype behind them right now. 2 5-stars in this class, one of them being Travis Hunter, who is a teammate of Coleman, along with the quarterback on Coleman and Hunter's 7-on-7 team, both being committed to Florida State. Both of those guys are really in Coleman's ear, and how could you blame them? If Coleman was your teammate on 7-on-7, of course you'd be trying to get him to go to Florida State if you were committed there. It only makes sense, and Hunter's pitch to Coleman has been, hey man, I'm a top corner in this class. You're a top receiver in this class. Come to Florida State and let's go top on top every single day. Now, here's what I will say. Teams like Alabama, teams inside of this will also use that same pitch, especially when Alabama just nabbed the number 1 cornerback in the nation out of last year's class and will be actively looking to flip both Travis Hunter, Damani Jackson, and then get the commitment of Denver Harris in this class. But the Florida State Seminoles are a team that if they go out this fall and can put together a decent season where they just improve, I'm not saying they have to be coming in second place in the ACC, just improve. This is a team that's recruiting is looking very positive, but results have to be shown on field. That's going to be very key, is how can the results be shown on field. Next up, Texas. Texas is in a very good place for Kevin Coleman, and actually the word around Austin is very positive. They feel like they are in a good spot for Coleman, but I think Texas understands a few things. First off, their main pitch right now is Steve Sarkisian, a continuation of the pitch from Alabama Crimson Tide, but Andre Coleman is doing good work there as well. I think the thing that makes the most sense when it comes to Texas is the same thing that we've talked about in the past. Right now, Texas is recruiting on a ton of hype, and you can't really blame them when you look at the coaching staff they've put together. It is a lot of hype, and deservedly so. We've talked about this. But I think right now the most important thing for Texas in their process of getting a Kevin Coleman is being able to put those results on the field next year. And even though I have no doubt that a guy like Bijan Robinson is going to just eat, it's going to be interesting to see what the wide receiver position does at the University of Texas, though early sound bites from Austin say Jordan Whittington is looking very good. But Coleman's process with Texas, I think, will be very indicative of how Sark is able to implement that scheme to Austin and how successful it is. That's going to be very big, but Sark is a very real threat in this race. Arizona State, he has a good relationship with the wide receivers coach, Pentis Gill. He's got a good relationship with the DB coach, Chris Hawkins, and that's going to be big. Right now, Arizona State has a pass-happy offense. He likes that. And they have recently sent multiple guys to the first round of the NFL draft, and that's something he highlighted. And that's why I think it's so important when we're talking about the development of receivers for there to be on-field production. As much hype as Florida State currently has recruiting right now, deservedly so, you're doing an incredible job. Sam McCall and Travis Hunter already? Goodness gracious. And as much hype as Texas has recruiting right now, Coleman's a guy who's talked about wanting to be developed. That hype has got to manifest itself into results. And if it does, now we're talking some serious business. But nonetheless, Texas, Arizona State, Florida State, all very much well in this, but it is interesting to note that he has kind of pointed out the development and sending guys to the first round. That's kind of something to think about, but he is right. The Arizona State, they have a very pass-heavy offense. They have sent guys to the first round of the NFL draft. That's one to look out for. And he has expressed interest in playing on the West Coast. So when we go through these next schools, it'll make sense. Oregon was a school he considered a childhood favorite. He loved DeAnthony Thomas coming up, and who didn't, right? Who in the age of watching that Oregon football team didn't love DeAnthony Thomas? One of the most exciting football players in my lifetime, easily to watch. Really, really awesome. But the Oregon Ducks are very much well in this. I think the thing for me for Oregon is the ability, once again, to be able to develop receiver, and it's going to be very interesting because they got Troy Franklin in the last class, who was a 5-star, and depending on what he does, and it's not solely going to come down to him, but that'll be a good measuring stick, especially when there's a quarterback competition and new guy with a ton of talent is in there, and Ty Thompson. How is he going to be able to push it? I don't know that he's the starter. There's a lot of storylines up at Oregon. I think they have a lot going for them, but they have got to manifest something into results this season on the offensive side. A lot of flash has been shown up there in Eugene, but not a lot of consistency, and I'm very interested to see how this new offense continues to evolve under Moorhead. Looking at USC is a program that we have talked about at length for multiple different recruits. It does not surprise me at all that Kevin Coleman has regarded USC very highly. They have done a phenomenal job on the trail recruiting, and they, like Florida State, are surging. They have used Amon-Ra St. Brown as a pitch to Kevin Coleman in saying, like, we can have you in a system like this. And from what I gather, he is a fan of the stylistic scheme that USC provides. So, USC location, the way they're recruiting right now, very, very real. The last two schools on this list, Penn State and Georgia, may just be the dark horses, and let me explain. Penn State might be a dark horse because it's the only Big Ten school listed, and right now, their current best pitch is offensive coordinator Mike Urick, who came over from Texas. The reason why I put them as a dark horse is because even though I think that's a good pitch, I think Texas is actually in a better position now that Sark has taken over the recruitment of Coleman than they were a year ago this time. And so because of that, even though Penn State will be in this, they might be a dark horse, but I think they're a team that we need to keep in mind because they have been able to develop some receivers, guys like KJ Hamler here very recently, and that's going to be interesting. Now, Georgia is a team that we know can recruit at the highest level of college football at the drop of a dime. And so even though right now I think Georgia is a dark horse, we do realize that if Georgia turns it up, they could easily turn this around. They're a lot like Alabama, where you really don't count them out until the name is on the dotted line. They're phenomenal in their capacity to recruit, and Coleman has taken a visit to Georgia, which means this is a real threat. Plus, since 2015, the Georgia Bulldogs have been nothing but productive in sending guys to the NFL for wide receiver. So if we're looking at Kevin Coleman, he's a guy who's talked about wanting to be developed, and I think that this is going to truly go the distance. He wants to commit July 8th, and look, this is recruitment and commitments, right? This could all change at the drop of a hat if he feels like he's ready to commit tomorrow. Do I think that will happen? No, I think it'll go to July 8th. But it is important to note that this is recruitment, and this is just talking for fun because anything can happen. I think a lot of these schools have to feel very good about where they're at. But specifically, Alabama, Oregon, and Texas have got to feel very positive. Florida State as well. But there are some teams in this list, such as Florida State and Texas, that will be taking this to another level if they can manifest the results. And once again, Alabama, if they're able to come back and reload at the wide receiver position after losing Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith this year, with John Mechie going out there and having a 1,000-yard season, man, that's going to be a hard pitch to disregard. But I cannot wait to hear what y'all are thinking. Hop down below. Let me know where you think he goes and what you're thinking on this. That's it. See ya.